My stepmother is a real queen of double dealing. She steals behind our backs, hiding behind the perfect mask of a caring wife, thinking no one will catch on. But her flawless plan is coming apart at the seams, and I have every chance to turn her world to ashes. The only question is she ready for her secrets to come to light? My name's Tyler, I'm 18, and I live in one of those suburbs where every house is a carbon copy of the next. Everything's so uniform that it feels like even the fence colors have been approved by some ultra-secret committee for boredom. Life here moves as predictably as the school bus schedule. But recently, that calm was blown to pieces. One evening, I'm sitting in the living room flipping through my textbooks. You know, a typical night before exams when your brain convinces you that the chapters will magically teach themselves. Then the mailman drops off a bunch of letters. As usual, it's bills, bank statements, and the usual snooze-worthy stuff. But one envelope stands out, a seal from some offshore bank with no return address. I think, what's this creepy thing? I open it, and there it is, a bank statement under my dad's name, Robert, and I nearly choke. You see, my dad is absurdly meticulous with finances. He's the type to double-check every cafe receipt just to make sure he isn't accidentally overcharged for burger sauce. Offshore accounts. He probably doesn't even know what that means. And suddenly, I get a chill down my spine. Could this be Linda's doing? A little background on Linda is probably in order. This woman is the total opposite of my dad. She's 45 and always wears this smile, like she just found out she's become the Queen of England. She tries way too hard to play the perfect wife and stepmom role. She joined our family 2 years ago, and I've felt ever since that she's not who she claims to be. You know how some people just seem too perfect, but it only makes you feel worse? That's Linda, and it looks like my suspicions are finally being confirmed. I realize I have to dig deeper. This can't be a one-time transfer if she's up to something shady. So I head to my dad's office, where I assume all the important documents are stored. I sift through the papers, flipping through file after file, and then I find several more statements. Same account, with transfers going back months. At this point, my inner detective is going nuts. It feels like I'm in some high-stakes thriller, except this is way too real. These transfers have been going on for months, and the amounts are enough to buy at least 3 houses like ours in this suburb. With every new document, my anger builds, and the sense of betrayal feels like it's about to explode. Meanwhile, Linda, with her trademark smile, goes on hosting dinners and trying to lecture me about family values. Yeah, I've got my own opinion on her family values now. Imagine this. I'm in my dad's office, surrounded by old, dusty folders and papers that even dinosaurs would have tossed out as junk. And here I am, like Sherlock Holmes in sneakers and sheer determination, diving into the investigation of the century. Linda's clearly hiding something, and I'm beyond curious to see just how far her little hobby has gone. I start digging through the documents, flipping through pages that would give any normal person a migraine. Honestly, I didn't expect to find much, just had my fingers crossed for luck. But then, bam! Statement after statement unfolds, and it's like a scene from a crime show. Linda's been transferring money to accounts in exotic countries with names that sound like ingredients in a Thai salad. Only, the amounts here are, well, pretty substantial. And now I'm really starting to question things. Linda, seriously? Making payments to bogus companies? And regularly? Have you ever heard of security? Even I, someone who checks his bank card once a year, can see that this is way too obvious a trail. Just in case, I flip through everything again and see that the amounts only get bigger. This isn't just some harmless little stunt. This is the scam of the century. My mind's in complete chaos. On one hand, I'm fuming with anger. I mean, really? How could she worm her way into our family and not even blush while playing the role of perfect wife? On the other hand, I'm incredibly curious. Does she have no shame or common sense at all? Did she really think I wouldn't notice these transfers? At first, I wanted to just rage. I was ready to grit my teeth, grab the first thing I saw, and chuck it at the wall. But I decided to keep a cool head and tackle this smartly. Yeah, Linda, here's a lesson for you. Teenagers aren't as dumb as you think. A plan starts forming in my mind. I'm going to expose her, and not just any old way. I'm going to do it so thoroughly that she won't have a chance to escape. The moment for a heart-to-heart couldn't have been more perfect. Dad had left on a business trip, leaving just me and Linda in the house. The atmosphere was tense, like we were in some action movie trailer. You know, the kind where the music gets all ominous, and you just know something's about to blow. I spent the whole day pacing, trying to find the right moment to catch her red-handed. Finally, I found her in the kitchen, stirring the dough for her famous lemon pie with that unmistakable look of satisfaction on her face. Linda loved to cook, and as it turned out, she loved cooking our family's money into offshore accounts even more. I didn't waste any time. I walked straight up to the table, tossed the folder of documents in front of her, and locked eyes with her. "Care to explain what this is?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, I was boiling over. Anger, adrenaline, and that rush of knowing I'd finally arrived at my moment of truth. Linda looked up, and for a second, there was a flash of fear in her eyes. She clearly didn't expect her little secret to become family knowledge. But she quickly recovered, putting on that sickly sweet smile, as if she was about to explain to me the finer points of beating egg whites. "Tyler, honey, you must have misunderstood," she said, tilting her head to the side. "Oh, of course, I misunderstood. How convenient, right?" I looked at her, and I just couldn't hold it in anymore. "Cut the act, Linda. I know all about the transfers to offshore accounts. I know you're deceiving my dad," I shot back, barely restraining myself from grabbing that folder and hurling it out the window. And that's when her face changed in an instant. The smile dropped, and her expression turned cold, like a predator who just realized its prey might escape. "You're too young to understand these things. Stay out of it," she hissed, like a snake that's just had its tail stepped on. "Seriously? Too young? That's her defense?" I almost laughed out loud. "Too young? Really? You think I don't see you taking advantage of our trust?" "This is the end, Linda," I said, my voice steady, feeling like I was in some eerie calm, waiting to see how she'd respond. She didn't even try to justify herself, just threw the towel on the counter and walked out of the kitchen, as if she had nothing more to say. I was left standing there, simmering with emotions. And that's when I realized something important. If she thinks I'm going to back down, she's in for a very unpleasant surprise. After that kitchen showdown, one thing became clear to me. Linda felt way too confident, like she was untouchable for all her offshore tricks. That could only mean one thing. She had someone backing her up on the other side. You know, like in those crime movies where the villain always has a partner in crime, ready to lend a hand for the dirty work. I realized I needed a new approach. I had to step up my game and go beyond just being the kid digging through papers. For the next few days, I combed through Dad's office, surrounded by bank statements, documents, even phone bills. After a few sleepless nights, an absurd amount of coffee, and desperate Googling, I finally stumbled on something that made my eyebrows shoot up. Martin, 47 years old, a businessman with a reputation as pristine as a worn-out boot stuck to the asphalt after the rain. The pieces started to fall into place like a puzzle solving itself. Martin and Linda weren't just acquainted. They were acquainted in every sense of the word. Not just partners, but with the kind of privileges usually reserved for contracts with fine print. She was funneling Dad's money to him, and he was wrapping it up in shady deals and schemes, cleverly labeling them as business investments. And when it all hit me, I felt this tightening in my chest. This woman, my stepmother, was stealing from my family for some scam artist with a face like a cheap actor from a crime drama. My anger was boiling over, and I knew there was no going back now. Honestly, if I could have taken her down right then and there, I would have. But I realized I needed more. I needed solid evidence that would make her plans crash and burn. No way out. Then I thought of Mike, an old friend of my dad's who used to be a private investigator. He was about 60, but still sharper than most detectives out there. I called him up and asked to meet. When I told him the whole story, Mike chuckled and said, "Tyler, looks like you've stepped into something serious." He got up to speed quickly and agreed to help me gather hard evidence. We started working together, double-checking every detail, every transfer, every meeting Linda had with her friend. And let me tell you, I felt like hitting the jackpot with Mike. This guy seemed born for exactly this kind of case. Mike and I worked on the plan like real spies. We discussed every step to ensure that Linda and her partner, Martin, would not only take the bait, but also genuinely believe they were dealing with a big fish with a wallet full of cash. My fake email was crafted to make any scammer look at it and think, this is the jackpot of a lifetime. I chose the name Sebastian Devereaux. Sounds legit, right? Just the type of guy who'd live somewhere in a luxury neighborhood in Monaco, buying a new yacht every morning just because he can. Mike smirked when he heard the name, but agreed. It was perfect for someone who'd catch the attention of Linda and her greedy sidekick. So, the game began. My first email was formal, with an air of cold professionalism. I introduced myself as an international investor looking for high-potential projects in exotic markets. I added a few lines about how I'm drawn to high-risk ventures with the promise of insane profits. I knew that would hook them. A few days later, I got a reply from Martin, politely expressing interest and hinting at their unique scheme. Mike and I carefully crafted every response. I replied in the style of a big boss, hinting that I was ready to invest, but of course, required solid data and full transparency about the projects. Martin responded like we were discussing some fantastical deal of the century. Linda joined the conversation a bit later. Her emails were more cautious, but the allure of easy millions clearly took over, as her tone got progressively more relaxed with each message. I knew we were on the right track when Martin and Linda started to open up a little, dropping hints about the scheme. They stopped speaking in vague terms and began mentioning specific figures, company details, and even account numbers where I was supposed to send the initial deposit. I could practically see them rubbing their hands together, imagining how they'd split my money. And then, one evening, as I was checking my email, I got a message from Linda that was the cherry on top. She slipped up, whether from greed or a lapse in judgment, and spilled details about their operations, mentioning accounts and agreements that, as I understood, were blatantly illegal. I stared at the screen, rereading her message, and felt a grin spreading across my face. Inside, I was buzzing with two things: adrenaline and satisfaction. I'd finally gotten exactly what I needed. Now we didn't just have suspicions, we had real evidence, and I knew that with this email, Linda had no chance of getting out of it. The day finally arrived, the day of reckoning, like in a Hollywood movie where the hero finally confronts the enemy face to face. Only this time, our enemy wasn't a monster or a gun-wielding criminal, but my stepmother, Linda, who had mastered the art of playing the angel. Mike and I had meticulously organized all the evidence, packing each file like we were presenting a case for the trial of the century. We invited my dad for a talk, and he walked into the living room, unsuspecting, looking like he expected just another family discussion. But we'd prepared something special. At first, he listened quietly, but as we laid out the facts, his face went pale as paper. Imagine, a man who thought he had everything under control, suddenly realizing that someone he trusted had betrayed him so cleverly and cruelly that even the walls seemed to tremble with the weight of the truth. I sat across from him, uncertain of what he'd say. He was silent for a few minutes, and finally, when the truth had fully sunk in, he looked at me with a gratitude that made me feel almost uncomfortable. "Thank you, son," he said quietly. Those two words sounded so simple, but I felt a bond grow between us that was deeper than ever before. We weren't just father and son anymore. We were partners, real allies in the fight to take back control of our lives. So the plan went into action. We immediately called the bank and froze all accounts Linda might have access to. Dad's friends helped him find the best lawyers in town. We had a powerful team on our side, and trust me, when lawyers go after a case like they're preparing for a championship match, Linda didn't stand a chance. When Linda found out her accounts were frozen, it was a scene worthy of a record book. She stormed into the house, furious as a hurricane. "How dare you!" she screamed, as if we were the ones sabotaging her little side hustle instead of her robbing our family blind. She tried threatening Dad, playing the sympathy card, even insisting that it was all just a mistake and she didn't do anything wrong. But you know what was most interesting? All her power evaporated the moment she realized she couldn't manipulate us. All she could do was yell and hurl accusations, like an actress in a cheap soap opera. Her mask had fallen, and standing before us was not the composed, successful woman she pretended to be, but someone who had just lost everything she'd been scheming for. In the end, Dad filed for divorce, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Together, we'd stopped this con, and while I knew there was still a lot of work ahead, we were stronger than ever. Though a bitter taste lingered. Realizing that someone you almost considered family was a traitor doesn't just fade away. But that was the price of truth, and we both paid it. When Linda realized that her loyal partner, Martin, had vanished, the look on her face was priceless. Watching her calm, confident mask crack was pure satisfaction. She frantically tried calling him, firing off desperate messages, but Martin, like a true rat, had jumped ship. She was left all alone, like an actress on stage who had forgotten her lines. No money, no support, not the faintest chance of wriggling out of it. That's when I knew my plan was working perfectly. But leaving her broke? That would have been too merciful. I decided to take this show to its final act. I prepared a gift for law enforcement, a file containing all the evidence we'd gathered, neatly labeled with the most harmless name. Financial report. Everything was in there. The transfers, emails, schemes. It didn't take long for the police to see that Linda and Martin weren't just running a business, but a full-scale trust scam corporation on a pretty high level. And then, picture this. It's morning, sunny. Linda steps outside in her pristine suit with that carefully fixed smile she wore like armor. And then, bam, the police arrive. She tried to act surprised, even pretended she didn't understand what was happening. Her eyes darted around, like a mouse caught in a trap. They read her rights, and she stood there in a daze, unable to believe this was really happening to her. For a second, I thought she might actually drop to her knees and start begging for mercy. But knowing Linda, she's not the type to surrender with grace. She tried to say something along the lines of, "This is a mistake. You must have me confused with someone else." But her fake confidence was crumbling. Watching her eyes widen with fear was, honestly, a strange feeling. My anger had faded, leaving only a cold sense of satisfaction. Justice? Probably. Seeing her former self-assurance turn to desperation was incredible. She was used to being on top, pulling strings, playing her games, but now all her cards were exposed, and no matter how you look at it, it was her own mistake. She chose her path, and I just reminded her that not everyone gets away clean. A few weeks passed, and the house was finally filled with silence again. But this time, it wasn't the eerie, horror movie kind. It was relaxing, almost refreshing. Without Linda around, everything felt normal. The quiet was like a breath of fresh air after a raging storm. Dad went back to his work, and oddly enough, I started making plans for the future too. I began preparing for college, and funny enough, even textbooks didn't seem so boring anymore. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch, looking out at our calm yard, thinking about everything we'd been through. I used to be the kind of guy who thought he was ready for anything, but the reality turned out to be much different. This experience flipped my understanding of life upside down. I wasn't the naive kid anymore who believed family always plays fair. The world showed me its teeth, and as it turned out, I was capable of showing mine too. Life's a funny thing. You never know when the next hit is coming or who's going to throw it. And even though, at the time, it all seemed horrible, I realize now that it made my dad and me stronger. We became closer, began to truly appreciate each other. There's one important takeaway I got from this. Family isn't just the people you live with. It's those who stand by you, even when the world seems to be against you. Family is the people you're willing to protect at any cost, even if that means becoming a detective, lawyer, and strategist all at once. And if someone tries to tear that apart from the inside, well, be ready to bare your teeth and fight back. In the end, everyone gets what they deserve. Linda thought she could play her game forever, but she didn't count on the fact that I could be a player too. So yeah, as they say, you reap what you sow. Linda got what she deserved, and we got the chance to start over.